France. July 1944.02 600 hours. Somewhere near St. Lay. The forest was quiet in a way that wasn't peace. It was ambush. Fog hung low over the hedgerows, thick as milk, curling around helmets and boots. The American squad moved slowly, rifles held low, hearts held high, sweat already soaking through fatigues. 10 men, no chatter, just breath and steel nerves. Private Tom McClary walks second from the front. 19 from Ohio. First combat. Patrol. The only thing louder than the silence was what every man was thinking. It's too damn quiet. Then came the sound. Not a shot, a rip, a scream from the tree line, followed by a thunderclap of gunfire, MG-42s opening with surgical violence. The entire hedge erupted like a lightning strike. Friendlies dropped where they stood. One man's helmet spun clean off. Another fell mid-scream, still crawling with half his body behind him. Chaos, panic, more bullets, more death. And the instinct, primal, universal, took control. Get down. Take cover. Stay alive. Every man obeyed it, except one. Tom moved the opposite direction. He stepped forward, eyes wide, rifle shaking. He pulled the trigger. Short bursts. Return fire. No orders, no plan. Just forward. The squad didn't register it at first. They were too busy ducking, choking on mud, flattening into ditches. But something about seeing one of their own firing back, standing up when the sky was falling. It didn't compute, not in words, but it hit them in the bones. A corporal rose and followed. A third man shoved his helmet forward and scrambled in behind. Then they were charging. Dust and blood and bark rained from everywhere. German fire adjusted late, confused, hesitating. They weren't supposed to push back. Not this fast. Not without orders. 60 seconds. That's all it took for the tide to shift. For the myth of the American counterattack to be born, not in a manual, but in instinct. One man stood up first, and that changed everything. Before the blood and bullets, there were cows, and the sound of a rooster, and the soft creak of a wooden barn door in the early morning. It was February 1942 when Tom McClary last stepped through the frost-covered fields of his family's farm in Shelby County, Ohio. He walked like someone with too many chores and not enough heat, boots stiff, hands raw, breath misting in the dull blue air. His entire world back then was earth, sky, responsibility, and the weight of his father's silence. His days were routine. Milk before sunrise, chores by noon, evening mass on Sundays, and war talk at the table that nobody finished because his mother would close her eyes every time someone said Hitler or draft. Tom wasn't the fastest, or the biggest, or the best shot with the old .22 his grandpa gave him, but he watched. He noticed things like how his father could fix 6 different machines without yelling, how his dog would stare at the trees before storms, how some mornings felt like a goodbye. Pearl Harbor changed everything, almost overnight. Tom was 17 when the bombs fell, 18 when he enlisted. He told his parents it was his time, though he had no idea what that meant. At the train station, his father shook his hand like a stranger. His mother packed a Bible she knew he'd never read. His younger sister cried, but not until the train had already pulled away. Tom didn't enlist for medals or money. He wanted something simpler, a reason to matter. Training was fast and brutal. Camp Croft, South Carolina, then Tennessee, then England. Instructors screamed everything but answers. He learned to fire a rifle. He learned to hit paper targets. He learned to stay low, but nothing they taught him in a classroom could prepare him for what a screaming MG-42 sounded like from 30 yards. Still, there were moments in basic training, brief. Strange flashes when the instructors tested something else. One exercise, surprise ambush. Pop-up targets. Men freezing behind sandbags. Everyone ducked. Tom didn't. He rose, fired, dropped his magazine, and yelled at the guy next to him to cover the right side. Afterwards, the drill sergeant just walked past and muttered, "Don't think. Just react." For some unknown reason, Tom remembered that line more than any badge ceremony. In early July 1944, they boarded the LST to France. Tom wrote one last letter. Not to his parents. Not to a girl, to himself. When it happens, don't wait. Move, not for glory. Just so someone else doesn't have to. It was the final page in his footlocker, the morning before the ambush, the day before he would run toward gunfire. Tom had knelt in fresh mud to clean his boots. He looked up at the French hedgerow's eyes, calm, breath steady, and smiled. Not because he wasn't afraid, but because he knew exactly who he was. Just another farm boy, about to make a decision no one trained him for. They moved like a dial being turned. Every step was calculated, timed, muted. The Waffen-SS infantry unit assigned to this stretch of hedgerow in Normandy had one objective: bleed the Americans dry. Ambush them. Withdraw. Repeat. They didn't wear the swagger of the Wehrmacht. They didn't carry flags. And they didn't care about honor. Only affect Captain Erich Volker, 34, Bavarian-born, raised on maps and obedience, crouched behind the hedgerow with his men, all in camouflage smocks, all silent, all ready. His fingers traced the blessed iron cross chained to his collarbone. Not for prayer. For grounding, this ambush had been rehearsed for hours. MG for 2. Team at point 1. Riflemen spaced 5 meters down the U-curve, using fields of fire perfected in training sniper. In the barn loft, cut-off squads to block retreat. Any enemy squad that stepped into this corridor would be torn apart in under 13 seconds. Not theory, not they. Had done it 8 times before. 7 American squads. 1 British dot, all dead before grenades cleared their belts. Volker didn't talk much. He didn't need to. His genius was in his bluntness. Frighten them first, then finish them while they're crawling. He didn't believe in heroism. Only chaos and control through it. His men respected him because he never blinked. Even when bodies hit the road, even when the screaming started. He understood that in war, hesitation was sedition, and mercy was just murder with a longer timer. Their orders that morning were simple. Let the first soldier pass. Fire on the second. Always the second. Why? Because it shattered formation. Because soldiers trusted the man in front. Because when the second man dropped, brains staining his helmet, the rest turned to fear. Not strategy, fear was their primary weapon. He'd once told an exhausted corporal, "Don't aim for the heart. Aim for the mind." And it worked. Always Allied forces, especially Americans, had predictable responses. Fire gives cover, ambush gives scatter. Explosions give stuttered reaction, usually to the ground. Then came the orders, if any, and only after precious seconds bled away. And in those seconds, the SS machine did its work. But today felt different. Volker couldn't explain it. The air felt still, too still. Even the birds wouldn't perch nearby. He checked his watch. 0 to 558 hours, he clicked. His tongue once. Positions confirmed, rifle bolts slid. Forward, .mg, sights aligned, .trigger, gloved and ready. Then movement, figures in the mist. American helmets. Slouched posture. Loose formation, infantry, young. Maybe 18, 19? Perfect. Volker muttered. The first soldier passed. He raised his hand. The second man stepped into the kill cone. Jets. The Hedgerow erupted. The first MG-42 fired like a chainsaw through gravel 25 rounds in 2 seconds. One American was cut at the waist before his rifle ever left his shoulder. Another dropped flat, shoes skidding in mud. Others ducked. The trap had begun. Falker's men advanced up both sides like a tightening noose, no shouting. Only muzzle flashes and steel precision. Shells bounced off oak tree roots. Leaves fell in shreds. It was mechanical. But then, unexpectedly, something went wrong. One American didn't go down. He didn't scream. He didn't freeze. He stood, returned fire fast. Then another stood up. Then another, Falker, watched from behind his scope. And something flinched in his chest. What are they doing? This wasn't the Allied hesitation he'd taught his squad to expect. This was aggression. It disrupted timing. Someone missed a shot, a bina through shrapnel. Off tree bark that skewed a leg. The rhythm broke. The fear reversed, and for the first time in 8 ambushes. The Americans ran forward. Falker released one final burst from his MP-40, then fell back to meters. He didn't understand yet who that first man was, or why instinct had overpowered fear. He only knew this: the trap had been triggered. But something had chewed its way out instead. The screaming didn't sound human, high-pitched, guttural. Some of it English. Most of it just noise. Shots echoed from every side of the hedgerows, bouncing like ricochets through a metal drum dot. Private Tom McCleary lay flat on his stomach, face half buried in dirt. He could taste bark, blood, someone else's sweat, around him. His squad convulsed into chaos, a half-formed attempt at returning fire while pinned under. German bullets that fired with terrifying rhythm. Through the fog and smoke, bodies moved like shadows, slapping at the earth, trying to vanish into it. Flashes lit up the fog like lightning in a thunderless storm. To his left, a sergeant was down, head cracked open like a dropped melon. On his right, someone was whimpering under a tree. The entire squad had been trapped, not in movement, in thought. Tom's lungs burned. Not from running, from holding his breath. He could hear gunfire thudding into the ground just inches from his chest. None of it made sense. They hadn't walked into a fight. They'd been offered up clean targets. Then he saw it just ahead. Private Rainey, chest hit, still alive, writhing, pinned in the open. No cover, face locked in panic, holding his guts in with both hands. The bullets didn't stop coming. No one moved to help him, except something inside. Tom flipped, not like a choice, not like a thought, like a hand reaching from beneath all logic, shoving him upright. He rose, just rose, not fully, tall, but enough to be seen, enough to be shot. His rifle came up as if pulled by something. Older than training, he fired blind at first, suppressive, angry. His boots moved without his permission, skidding forward across wet soil. He didn't yell. He didn't say a word. He charged. The world exploded around him. MG fire rippled through the hedges. Bark splintered off a tree beside his head. One bullet tore through the strap of his helmet, nearly ripping it free. Still, he ran. Still, he fired. In half a second, Grover behind him scrambled up, shouting something unintelligible and letting off rounds in support. Then Mathers. By the time Tom reached Rainey, 3 others were upright, running, gunning. Shifting from survival to violence, the German rhythm began to break. They expected hesitation. They got momentum. A single grenade from Corporal Nunez arced toward the flank. It didn't land where it was meant to, but it was enough. A machine. Gun fell silent. Another shifted fire. Tom reached Rainey, dropped beside him, yanked him behind the stump of a blown-out tree trunk, and pressed his hand over the kid's wound. Stay. With me, he whispered, more plea than command. Then he stood again, turned back to the line, and advanced. 3 Americans now. Then 4. Then the whole squad. Not organized. Not clean, but they were on their feet. The counterattack had begun, not from an order. Not from a radio, from a man who'd simply refused to die lying down. German fire faltered. Falker, watching from behind a hedge, blinked in disbelief. This wasn't a rally. This was a wave, crude, ugly, untrained. But crushing the battle plan dissolved. Every timer, every angle, every carefully prepared zone overrun by raw aggression by Americans who didn't think. They reacted. Falker tried to signal a fallback too. Late, a bullet from someone's M1 carbine caught the edge of his helmet and sent him spinning into the mud. Not dead, but no longer in command. His trap was now being eaten alive in just 90 seconds. The battlefield turned, not because the Americans had more men, but because one of them had stood while the rest were still listening to fear. Later, in the quiet, someone would ask Tom what happened. He wouldn't have an answer. He hadn't made a decision. He hadn't played hero. He'd seen a friend bleeding in the open. And something inside him couldn't allow that to be the ending. The guns weren't gone, just quieter. One had fallen silent, blown apart by a lucky grenade, but 2 more still barked through the fog like hounds with steel teeth, bursting through brush, spitting lead through smoke. The counterattack had bought them ground, not safety. McCleary knelt behind a low ridge beside Nunez and Mathers, his fingers still blistered from firing. The world was muted now, like a dream wrapped in wool. Somewhere behind them, Rainey was being pulled to cover. Too much blood. Not enough hands. Ahead, the machine guns kept firing. "We have to flank," Corporal Durney hissed. He was pale, bleeding from one ear. "We can't take them head-on again." McCleary nodded. No plan, but no argument either. They had less than a minute before the Germans adjusted. If those guns refocused, they cut through again. No cover would save them. Durney pointed to a break in the trees, just wide enough for a man to slip through, crawling. It spiraled around the hedgerow, and if memory served, put them behind the enemy firing line. The downside? They had no idea who else was waiting back there. You with me?" Durney said, jabbing a finger toward McCleary and Nunez. "Everyone else, suppress. Do not stop until we stop them. No time for hero speeches. Just head nods." McCleary slammed a fresh clip into his M1, wiped sweat from the grip, and went. They crawled low, mud swallowing sleeves and knees. The branches clawed at their uniforms like desperate fingers. Somewhere to the left, the MG hammering continued, knowing, punishing, holding down the main body of the American squad with robotic precision. McCleary didn't breathe. Each foot forward felt quieter than thought. Nunez behind him whispered, "They say don't volunteer." "Remind me why I did again." McCleary whispered back without turning, "You didn't. You followed." Thorns tore his hand at one point. He didn't flinch, just kept crawling like instinct was dragging him now. Forward, closer. They emerged just 10 yards behind the machine gun nest. 2 Germans. One loaded belts, the other fired. Focused forward, waiting for clean aims and scared boys to stop twitching behind dirt banks. They didn't hear death coming. Durney raised his fist, dropped it. Nunez fired one clean round to the loaders. Back. McCleary took the gunner. 3 shots, low to high. Both dropped before they knew which direction the shot had come from. The gun fell quiet. Its barrel smoked like a dying torch behind them. The American line surged forward. Victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like breathing heavy. like tasting dirt, like being alive when someone else wasn't. Clear. Durney shouted. Secure the nest. More men poured in. The flanking trio melted back into the chaos. No cheers. But the rhythm had changed. The break-in lines became momentum. The momentum became motion. And the motion became a route. That flank wasn't marked on a map. No commanding officer had given the order. It just happened because 3 men moved when instinct said move, or everyone else would have died where they lay. They thought it was over. The gun nest was down. The flank had held. The American line had pushed through the teeth of the hedgerows, leaving broken weaponry and collapsing trenches in its wake. But war rarely ends clean, and the Germans rarely leave quietly. A fresh burst of MG fire thundered from a blind corner, a fallback position too well hidden to spot. Earlier, it caught the left edge of the American team. Mid-dash movement, 1 man went down. Then another. Corporal Durney screamed to pull back. Get flat. Regroup. But the field was too open, too bright now. Cover didn't exist anymore. Men dove behind trees. Smoke grenades hissed too thin to matter. Panic buzzed just beneath the adrenaline. And just like that, the line began to crack. McCleary felt it in his spine. Not fear. Not defeat. The shift. He turned. Saw Nunez reloading dry. Hands shaking. Saw Durney forcing his radio to work, screaming into static. Saw the new MG position tearing into everything. Its rhythm unforgiving. The Germans had regrouped faster than anyone thought possible, and they were flanking them now. If they crossed 30 more yards, they'd split the Americans in half. No one was ready. No one had the angle. Except him. No thoughts, just motion. McCleary broke from his position without saying a word. No cover. No backup. No time. An open sprint straight into the gun. Behind him, Mathers yelled, "Tom!" No. But there was no bringing him back. He ran with the entire battlefield burning around him, a single silhouette. Against lead and chaos, the MG team spotted him too. Late, he was already within 30 feet, grenade in hand. He pulled the pin. Flung a hand, it hit perfect. Right beneath their barrel, the thunder cracked. A silence followed, but McCleary didn't dive. He couldn't. A second to slow the grenade. Exploded. Not wide enough to kill him, but enough he went down mid-stride. Legs kicked forward by the blast. One jagged piece of shrapnel tore into his abdomen. Another sliced beneath the collarbone. He hit the ground like a bag of sand. Breath knocked clean out of him. Rifle tumbling yards away. Nunez reached him first. Skidded through the dirt. Grabbed Tom under the arms and started dragging him back, yelling for help. "Stay with me. Come on, damn it. Stay with me." Blood pulsed through fingers, soaked into the sleeves. Tom tried to speak. Couldn't. His lips moved. Nunez bent closer. "What's it say, man? What is it?" Tom exhaled a word more shape than sound. ... Hold it. Then his hand, outstretched, gripping the dirt like it mattered. Durney finally reached them, slapping gauze over the wound. Shouting for a corpsman who was already sprinting in. But they knew. Some wounds don't heal. 1 minute passed, then 2. And then Tom McCleary closed his eyes, not in pain, but peace. As if in those final seconds, he saw something worth dying for. A line that had held a friend who'd lived an attack that didn't crush them. The corpsman shook his head. Nunez sat back. Jacket soaked in blood. He stared at Tom's face, blank, clean, young. Too young behind them. Silence settled over the field. German radio chatter faded. The ambush that had unraveled them was now shattered. The American squad regrouped, moved forward, finished. The hedgerow was theirs, but no one smiled. Hours later, back at the staging camp, someone placed Tom's helmet on a shovel, speared it upright in the soil, a field cross handmade. Inside his pocket, they found a folded scrap of paper. "If I go first, don't stop, don't cover me, use me." No one said a word for a long time, and then Durney, whose hands had stabilized more men than he cared to count, whispered across the firelight. He didn't win that field with bullets. He did it by not being afraid to bleed on it. And just like that, the war would remember a name that never touched a headline. Tom McLeary, 19, Private. U.S. Infantry, killed in action, charging. Not hiding, one man got others standing. One final charge turned a collapse into a victory, and blood marked the map as clearly as steel ever could. That night it rained, not the kind of storm that cleanses, but the slow, steady kind that sunk into uniforms and skin like regret. Dirt turned to mud. Footprints vanished in minutes. Shell casings filled with water where moments earlier there had been blood, and beneath a crooked maple tree near the field's edge, they buried Tom McLeary. No body bag, no formal prayer. Just a canvas blanket, a helmet placed carefully on a wooden stake, and a single line etched into a piece of scrap plywood. He stood. That was enough. The squad didn't speak much around the fire that night, even the most seasoned among them. Men who had seen frozen death in the Ardennes, burned flesh in Sicily, or lifeless children inside church ruins sat quiet, chewing slowly, smoking in rhythm, staring into flames, not for warmth, but for distraction. There were still Germans out there. There would always be Germans, but for a moment, none of them cared. Corporal Durney unfolded the letter they'd pulled from. Tom's breast pocket crinkled, damp, ink slightly smeared. He read it aloud in a voice so thin it barely made it over the crackle of wet logs. "If you're reading this, well, I guess I did something dumb. Probably didn't duck. Probably didn't think. But if I'm gone, I don't want medals or speeches. I just want you to promise one thing. Stop hesitating. If you're scared, move anyway. If someone's down, go for them, and if someone starts falling back, be the one who runs forward." Durney folded the paper and slid it into Nunez's pack without a word. Nearby, the squad's youngest, Private Ellis, 17, lead about his age, sat staring at McLear's empty foxhole. He hadn't moved in nearly an hour. Finally, he muttered. I froze out there. Durney didn't scold him, didn't nod. He just tapped the note inside. Nunez's pack. So did he, until he stood. They all knew. What would happen next? Orders would come another. Mission, another march. Armor would roll over this field in the morning and erase there. Footprints. Supply trucks would pass the grave, without stopping, by next week. Even command might forget this ambush, but the men who were there would not. They would carry it. In the curve of their shoulders, in the silence between jokes, in the way each of them now reloaded just a little faster. Tom wasn't a war hero. He was just the first one to move, and now, none of them would forget how much that had cost him, or saved them. The rain didn't let up for 3 more hours, but no one went inside, because, in a way, they still had someone to watch over. The story of Tom McLeary didn't make it into war films. His name wasn't pinned to a barracks or stitched into a decoration. But without knowing it, the men who followed him began to act as he once had. They moved first, weeks after the ambush. Members of McLeary's squad were reassigned to other units. Some to Bastogne, others to the Siegfried Line. 2 cross paths again in Belgium, trading stories by firelight between artillery shellings. Everywhere they went, they remembered one thing: don't wait. Move first, not just out of bravery, because they had seen what hesitation cost and what it could stop if challenged. Soon, the behavior started to spread. One corporal trained his replacements by saying, "If gunfire starts, don't dive, dive forward." Another told recruits to watch the flanks, not the sky. Let the artillery have God. You take responsibility for the 30 feet in front of you. That wasn't doctrine. That was legacy, passed from mouth to memory. Through blood, an Allied war correspondent, embedded with infantry during the 1944 push into Metz, once wrote, "It's strange. The British duck, the French take cover, but the Americans? When caught off guard, they attack like lightning." He asked a lieutenant why. The lieutenant only shrugged. "I guess somebody's got to be first." After the war, this behavior was studied and noticed. Analysts wrote pages about the aggressive tempo of U.S. infantry. War colleges mapped diagrams onto chalkboards showing how American squads instinctively pushed back under ambush, while others froze. They said it stemmed from training. From confidence, from terrain familiarity. But they were wrong. It came from men like Tom, not trained to counterattack, not ordered to, just wired to move forward when the rest of the world told you to go still. Years later, when a general gave a post-war interview about battlefield psychology, he was asked, how did morale stay high when facing such devastating German superiority in early engagements? He tapped the table once, then replied, because someone always stood up first, and men remember what it cost him not to hesitate. This wasn't just about tactics. This was about trust. Trust that no matter how bad it got, somebody in your unit would stand. And if one man could do it, maybe you could too. Tom's name never made it beyond dog tags and memories. But the behavior did, and it kept moving, not through film or ceremony, but through footsteps on foreign dirt, through the reflex someone picked up after hearing what happened on a muddy French hedgerow during a nameless skirmish you won't find in textbooks. They always counterattacked, because someone once did before it became expected. History doesn't always remember names, it remembers movements, moments, that spark that lit a match, not the match itself. Tom McCleary wasn't supposed to change anything. He was just another face in a uniform, another farm kid with dirt under his nails and two big boots to fill. He didn't lead a charge on a hill with music behind him. He didn't command battalions or write letters that shaped policy. He just saw a man bleeding in the open and got up. That was it. He stood when everyone else stayed down, and men saw it and followed. That's how legacy works. Not through medals or stages, but through memory that rides on the backs of others, passed quietly. Through instinct and example, they say American infantry are aggressive, that they counterattack quicker than anyone else. They say it like it's doctrine, a rule on paper. But maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe it started somewhere in the mud, when one man said, "If I don't move, no one will." And when it counted, someone always did. Subscribe to remember the soldiers who didn't kneel before fear, but ran through it for Tom, for those who followed, and for the next man still waiting for someone else to stand up first.